The water was cold when I stepped into the lake that November morning. Cold enough to make my breath catch, cold enough to make me feel alive for the first time in 3 years. I walked deeper, letting the darkness swallow my ankles, then my knees, then my thighs. Behind me on the shore I could hear them screaming. Lisa's voice, shrill and panicked. Micah's voice, deeper but just as desperate. Dorothy. Dorothy, what are you doing? Come back. I didn't turn around. I kept walking. Mom, she's lost her mind. That was Micah. My husband. The man who promised to love and protect me. She's going to drown herself. I smiled then. A real smile. The first one in so long. Because they didn't know. They had no idea what I'd done. What I'd been planning for 6 months. What was about to unfold. The water reached my chest and I stopped. I turned slowly, my wet nightgown clinging to my body, my hair plastered to my face. They stood at the edge of the lake, both of them, their faces twisted with something that almost looked like concern. Almost. Please. Lisa called out, her hands clasped together like she was praying. Think about Atlas. Your baby needs you. At the mention of my son's name, something flickered across my face. They saw it. They thought they'd found my weakness. They were wrong. You should have thought about Atlas, I said, my voice carrying across the water, before you tried to destroy me. And then I let myself fall backward into the water, disappearing beneath the surface. Let them wonder. Let them panic. Let them think they'd won, right up until the moment they realized they'd lost everything. Because this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning of their nightmare. Before we continue, please write in the comment which country you are watching this video. We love knowing where our global family is tuning in from. And if this is your first time on this channel, please subscribe. Your support helps us bring even more epic revenge tales of life. Enjoy listening. My name is Dorothy Clark. Well, Dorothy Everett now, though I'm starting to hate that name. And 6 months before that morning at the lake, I was a different person. Weaker. Quieter. More willing to bend. Let me take you back to where it all started. The moment everything changed. It was a Tuesday morning, early April. The kind of morning where the sun barely breaks through the curtains and your body feels like it's made of lead. I'd been up all night with Atlas, my 3-month-old son. He'd been crying since midnight, his tiny face scrunched up and red, his little fists waving in the air. Colic, the doctor said. It would pass. But that night it felt endless. I'd finally gotten him to sleep around 5:30 a.m., my eyes burning, my whole body aching. I'd crawled back into bed, pressed myself against the cold sheets and let my eyes close. Just 2 hours, I'd thought. Just give me 2 hours. I'd barely drifted off when I heard the door to our bedroom slam open. It's 7 a.m. and you're still sleeping. The voice cut through my dreams like a knife. Before I could even open my eyes, I felt the sharp sting across my cheek. My head snapped to the side and suddenly I was wide awake, my face burning, tears springing to my eyes. Lisa Everett stood over me, her hand still raised, her face contorted with rage. She was a tall woman, thin and angular, with sharp features and cold gray eyes. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun and she wore her usual outfit, expensive slacks and a silk blouse that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Get up and make me breakfast, she hissed, her voice dripping with contempt. I pressed my hand to my cheek, feeling the heat radiating from where she'd struck me. My mouth opened but no words came out. I was too shocked, too confused, too exhausted to form a coherent thought. You heard her. That voice made my blood run cold. I looked past Lisa to see Micah standing in the doorway, his arms crossed over his chest. My husband. The man I'd married 2 years ago, the man who'd promised to stand by me through everything. He was leaning against the doorframe and there was something on his face that made my stomach turn. He was smirking. And don't waste time, Micah added, his tone casual, almost bored. My mother needs to eat early. I stared at him, waiting for him to laugh, to tell me this was some kind of sick joke. But he just stood there, that smirk never leaving his face. Well, Lisa snapped, crossing her arms. Are you deaf as well as lazy? Get up. Something inside me cracked. Not broke, not yet, but cracked. Like ice forming fissures before it shatters completely. I pushed myself out of bed, my legs shaking. I was up all night with Atlas, I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. He was crying, Anne. I don't care about your excuses, Lisa interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. You're his mother. That's your job. But your job is also to take care of this household, And that includes feeding me when I'm hungry. Lisa, I just need. Mrs. Everett, she corrected sharply. You will address me as Mrs. Everett. We're not friends, Dorothy. We're family, and in this family respect is paramount. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of her. Not in front of him. Yes, Mrs. Everett, I whispered. Good. Now go. I want eggs Benedict, fresh orange juice and coffee. And make sure the eggs are poached properly this time. Last week they were overdone. I nodded and moved toward the door, but Micah didn't step aside. I had to squeeze past him, and as I did, he leaned in close. Maybe if you spent less time sleeping and more time being a proper wife, we wouldn't have this problem, he murmured, his breath hot against my ear. I didn't respond. I couldn't. If I opened my mouth, I knew I'd either scream or sob, and I couldn't afford to do either. I walked down the hallway in a daze, my cheeks still throbbing, my mind spinning. As I passed Atlas's nursery, I heard him stirring, making those little cooing sounds that usually made my heart melt. Today they just made me want to cry. The kitchen was cold and sterile, all stainless steel and white marble. Lisa had insisted on remodeling it when she moved in 6 months ago, right after Atlas was born. A proper home needs a proper kitchen, she'd said. What she meant was, a kitchen that met her standards. Because that's what our life had become. Everything had to meet Lisa's standards. I moved through the motions mechanically, cracking eggs, heating water, slicing English muffins. My hands were shaking so badly that I nearly dropped the eggs twice. The kitchen felt like it was closing in on me, the walls pressing closer with each passing second. How did I get here? I thought, staring down at the simmering water. How did my life become this? I met Micah Everett 3 years ago at a friend's wedding. He was charming, attentive, and so different from anyone I'd ever dated. He had this confidence about him, this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. He was handsome too, tall, with dark hair and hazel eyes that seemed to see right through you. You're too beautiful to be standing alone, he'd said, appearing beside me at the bar. I'd laughed, brushing it off. That's a line if I ever heard one. It's only a line if it's not true, he'd replied, smiling. I'm Micah. Dorothy. We talked for hours that night. He told me about his job in finance, about his family, about his dreams. He asked about mine. My work as a nurse, my love of reading, my quiet life. He made me feel seen in a way I'd never felt before. We dated for 8 months before he proposed. It was perfect. A candlelit dinner at an expensive restaurant. A beautiful ring, tears of joy streaming down my face. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, he'd said, down on one knee. I want to build a future together. Will you marry me? I said yes without hesitation. The wedding was small but elegant. Micah had insisted on paying for everything, even though I'd wanted to contribute. I want to give you the world, he'd said. Let me do this. Looking back now, I can see the red flags. The way he'd get irritated when I'd spend time with my friends. The way he'd criticize my clothes or my hair, always framed as helpful suggestions. The way he'd make decisions without consulting me, then act hurt when I questioned them. But I was in love. Or maybe I was just in love with the idea of being in love. Either way, I ignored the warning signs. His mother was another story. I met Lisa a month before the wedding. Micah had been strangely evasive about introducing us, always finding excuses to delay it. When we finally sat down for dinner at her massive estate across town, I understood why. Lisa had looked me up and down like I was livestock at an auction. So you're the nurse, she'd said, her tone making it sound like an insult. Yes, ma'am. I work in pediatrics. How quaint. She'd taken a sip of her wine. And your family? What do they do? My father was a mechanic. He passed away 5 years ago. My mother works at a library. Lisa's eyebrows had risen. I see. How modest. The dinner had been excruciating. Lisa had spent the entire evening making subtle digs about my background, my education, my job. Micah had barely said a word in my defense. On the drive home, I'd confronted him. Your mother doesn't like me. She's just protective, he'd said, keeping his eyes on the road. She'll warm up to you eventually. He never did. But I married him anyway, convinced that love would be enough. That we could make it work. I was so naive. The first year of marriage was fine. Not great, but fine. Micah was often busy with work, and I threw myself into my job at the hospital. We had our moments of happiness. Lazy Sunday mornings, date nights, quiet evenings watching movies on the couch. But there was always this undercurrent of tension. Micah was particular about things. The way I loaded the dishwasher. The way I folded laundry. The way I organized the pantry. He never yelled, but his disappointment was worse somehow. "I'm not angry," he'd say, his voice tight. "I'm just trying to help you improve." Then I got pregnant. Micah was thrilled. He'd always wanted children, he said. A son to carry on the family name. Because of course he wanted a son. He insisted I quit my job at the hospital. "You need to focus on the baby," he'd said. "Besides, I make enough for both of us. You don't need to work." I'd hesitated. I loved my job. I loved helping children, loved the satisfaction of making a difference. But Micah had been so insistent, so convincing. "Think about what's best for our child," he'd said, placing his hand on my barely there bump. "Don't you want to give him the best start in life?" So I quit. And slowly, subtly, my world started to shrink. Without work, I spent most of my time at home. Micah didn't like me going out with friends. "You need to rest," he'd say. He discouraged me from spending too much time with my mother. "She's too negative. Bad energy for the baby." He controlled the finances, giving me an allowance for groceries and household items. "I'm just trying to keep us organized," he'd explained when I questioned it. "You don't need to worry about money. That's my job." I told myself I was overthinking it, that he was just being practical, that this was normal. Then Lisa moved in. It happened a week after Atlas was born. I'd been home from the hospital for 2 days, still learning how to breastfeed, still trying to figure out how to function on 2 hours of sleep. I was sitting in the nursery rocking Atlas when I heard the front door open. "We're here." Lisa's voice rang through the house. I'd stumbled downstairs, confused, to find Lisa directing movers as they carried suitcases and boxes into our home. "What's going on?" I'd asked Micah, who was standing in the hallway looking uncomfortable. "My mother's going to stay with us for a while," he'd said, not meeting my eyes. "Just until you get the hang of things with the baby." "You didn't think to ask me first?" "It's my house too, Dorothy." His voice had been cold. "And Mom wants to help. You should be grateful." Grateful. That word would haunt me for the next 3 months. Lisa took over everything. She rearranged the nursery. She criticized the way I held Atlas, the way I fed him, the way I dressed him. She made comments about my body. "You're still carrying a lot of baby weight, aren't you?" And my clothes. "Do you own anything that isn't stained?" And my cooking. "I suppose this is edible." And Micah? Micah let it happen. More than that, he encouraged it. "Mom's just trying to help," he'd say whenever I complained. "She raised me, didn't she? She knows what she's doing." "But it's my baby, Micah. I should be allowed to." "Our baby," he'd corrected. "And my mother. We're a family, Dorothy. You need to stop being so selfish." Selfish. That was his favorite word for me now. Every day felt like drowning. I'd wake up exhausted, spend the day being criticized and controlled, and fall into bed at night too tired to even cry. I had no friends nearby. I'd lost touch with most of them after quitting work. My mother lived 3 hours away and didn't drive. I was completely isolated. And then came that morning. That slap. That smirk on Micah's face. That was the moment something inside me finally broke. I finished making breakfast in a fog, my mind spinning. When I brought the tray to Lisa in the dining room, she inspected it like a health inspector examining a failing restaurant. "The eggs are runny," she said, poking at them with her fork. "They're poached. They're supposed to be." "Don't talk back to me." Her eyes were ice. "I don't like runny eggs. Make them again." I stood there holding the tray, feeling something dark and hot building in my chest. For a moment, I imagined dumping the entire breakfast in her lap. Watching the hot coffee burn her expensive blouse. Seeing the shock on her face. But I didn't. Instead, I took the tray back to the kitchen and made the eggs again, this time cooking them until they were solid rubber. Lisa didn't complain this time. She ate in silence while Micah sat across from her, scrolling through his phone. I went back upstairs to check on Atlas. He was awake, staring up at the mobile above his crib with those big, innocent eyes. When he saw me, he smiled. That toothless, beautiful smile that usually made everything worth it. Today it made me want to cry. Because I realized, standing there looking at my son, that I couldn't keep living like this. Not for him. Not for me. Something had to change. I just didn't know what. The answer came later that day in the most unexpected way. I was in the living room folding laundry while Atlas napped in his bouncer when the doorbell rang. Lisa had gone out, some luncheon with her wealthy friends, and Micah was at work. I was alone. I opened the door to find a woman I didn't recognize. She was about my age, maybe a little older, with auburn hair and kind eyes. She held a casserole dish. "Hi," she said, smiling. "I'm Veronica. I live 3 houses down. I've been meaning to introduce myself since you moved in, but life's been crazy. I saw your car in the driveway and thought I'd finally stop by." I blinked, surprised. "Oh, that's very kind of you. I made too much lasagna last night, story of my life, and thought you might like some." I remember how hard those early months with a baby can be. Something about her warmth, her genuine kindness, made my eyes start to water. I quickly blinked the tears away. "Thank you," I managed. "That's really thoughtful." Veronica's smile faded and concern crossed her face. "Hey, are you okay?" And just like that, the dam broke. I started crying, really crying, right there in the doorway. Veronica didn't hesitate. She set the casserole down, stepped inside, and closed the door behind her. "Oh, honey," she said softly, pulling me into a hug. "What's wrong?" I couldn't stop. Weeks, months, of pain and humiliation and exhaustion came pouring out. I cried until I couldn't breathe, until my whole body was shaking. When I finally calmed down enough to speak, Veronica guided me to the couch. Atlas was still sleeping peacefully, oblivious to my breakdown. "I'm sorry," I whispered, wiping my face with my hands. "I don't know why I—" "Don't apologize," Veronica said firmly. "Just talk to me. What's going on?" And I did. I told her everything. About Micah's controlling behavior. About Lisa's cruelty. About the slap that morning. About how trapped and helpless I felt. Veronica listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with every word. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Dorothy," she finally said, "what you're describing is abuse." The word hit me like a physical blow. "No, it's not. He doesn't hit me. He's never—" "Abuse isn't just physical," Veronica interrupted gently. "It's emotional. It's controlling. It's isolating you from everyone who cares about you. It's making you doubt yourself. That's what he's doing. That's what they're both doing." I shook my head, but even as I did, I knew she was right. I'd been trying so hard not to see it, but it was the truth. "You need to leave," Veronica said. "You need to take your baby and get out of here." "I can't." The words came out automatically. "I don't have any money. I don't have anywhere to go. And Micah would never let me take Atlas. His family has lawyers. They'd destroy me in court." "Then you need a plan," Veronica said. "You need to be smart about this." She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. "This is my number. Call me anytime, okay? Day or night. I mean it." I took the card, my hands trembling. "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." "Because I've been where you are," Veronica said quietly. "My first husband was just like yours. It took me 3 years to get away from him, and I almost didn't survive. I won't watch another woman go through what I did without at least trying to help." She left shortly after, but her words stayed with me. They echoed in my mind as I moved through the rest of the day, as Lisa came home and criticized the way I'd arranged the living room, as Micah ignored me at dinner. That night, after everyone was asleep, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. My cheeks still hurt from where Lisa had hit me. My body ached with exhaustion. My heart felt like it was breaking. But for the first time in months, I felt something else too. Bigger. Not the hot, explosive kind. The cold, calculating kind. The kind that burns slow and steady and doesn't go out. If I couldn't leave, then I'd make them want me gone. Or better yet, I'd make them pay for what they'd done to me. I just needed a plan. The next morning I started keeping records. I found an old notebook in the back of a drawer. One of those cheap spiral-bound ones, and I started writing everything down. Every insult. Every controlling behavior. Every moment of cruelty. I dated each entry and described exactly what happened. April 15th. Lisa slapped me for sleeping past 7 a.m. Micah watched and told me to hurry with breakfast. April 16th. Micah went through my phone while I was in the shower. He deleted 3 contacts, friends from my old job, without asking. April 17th. Lisa told me I was an embarrassment for wearing sweatpants around the house. She said I'd let myself go since having Atlas. I hid the notebook inside a tampon box in the bathroom, the one place I knew neither of them would look. But writing things down wasn't enough. I needed more. I started recording conversations on my phone. At first I felt guilty about it, like I was doing something wrong. But then I'd remember the smirk on Micah's face as his mother hit me, and the guilt would evaporate. I captured Lisa berating me for overcooking the pasta. Micah telling me I was lucky he stayed with me after I'd ruined my body having his baby. Lisa calling me stupid and worthless when I accidentally broke a wine glass. I saved everything to a cloud account they didn't know about. Insurance, I told myself. Just in case. But I also started doing something else. Something that made my skin crawl but felt necessary. I started going through their things. When Lisa was out and Micah was at work, I'd search the house. Lisa's bedroom. Micah's home office. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly. Just something, anything I could use against them. Took 2 weeks before I found anything interesting. I was in Micah's office, carefully going through his filing cabinet, when I found a folder labeled Financials, Personal. Inside were bank statements, investment records, and, most interesting, several withdrawals for large amounts of cash. Thousands of dollars taken out every few weeks. We weren't hurting for money. Micah made a good salary. So where was all this cash going? I took photos of everything with my phone and put the folder back exactly how I'd found it. The next discovery came from Lisa's room. She had a small desk in the corner, always locked. I'd never tried to open it before, too scared of getting caught. But one afternoon while she was at her book club, I decided to try. I used a hairpin to pick the lock, a skill I'd learned from a YouTube video the night before. My hands were shaking so badly that it took me 15 minutes, but I finally got it open. Inside were more financial documents. But these weren't Micah's. They were Lisa's. And they told an interesting story. Lisa Everett was broke. Or close to it. The statements showed maxed out credit cards, overdue bills, and a bank account with barely $1,000 in it. But that didn't make sense. Lisa wore expensive clothes. She drove a luxury car. She acted like money was no object. Unless it wasn't her money. I dug deeper and found emails, printed out and filed away, between Lisa and Micah. They were discussing the arrangement. My hands trembled as I read. "Mom, I told you I'd take care of you," Micah had written. "Just keep Dorothy under control. Make sure she doesn't get any ideas about leaving. Once I have full access to her father's life insurance money, we'll be set." My blood ran cold. My father's life insurance money. When Dad died, he'd left me $200,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to give me security. I'd put it in a savings account, planning to use it for emergencies or maybe a house down payment someday. But when I married Micah, he'd convinced me to move it to a better investment account. One he managed. "Trust me," he'd said. "I know what I'm doing. I'll make this money grow for us." I trusted him. Of course I had. He was my husband. I took photos of everything. Every email, every statement, every document. My mind was racing. Micah had been planning this from the beginning. He'd married me for my money. He'd isolated me, controlled me, destroyed my independence. Also, he could take what was mine. And Lisa, he was in on it. That's why she'd moved in. That's why she worked so hard to keep me beaten down and powerless. He was getting a cut. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to burn the whole house down. Instead, I carefully put everything back the way I'd found it, locked the desk, and went to check on Atlas. My baby was sleeping peacefully, his little chest rising and falling. He looked so innocent, so pure. He had no idea what kind of family he'd been born into. "I'm going to protect you," I whispered, gently touching his soft cheek. "I promise. They're not going to hurt you the way they've hurt me." But I needed more than evidence. I needed a plan. A real one. That's when I called Veronica. Veronica and I met at a coffee shop across town. Far enough that there was no chance of running into anyone who knew Micah or Lisa. I told them I had a doctor's appointment and took Atlas with me. "You look terrible," Veronica said when she saw me. Not mean, just honest. "I feel terrible," I admitted. We sat in a corner booth and I showed her everything. The notebook. The photos of the financial documents. The recordings. She went through it all, her expression growing harder with each piece of evidence. "This is good," she finally said. "This is really good. You could take this to a lawyer right now and file for divorce. With this evidence, you'd probably get full custody and most of the assets. But I could hear the but in her voice. But it'll take time. Months, maybe years. And in the meantime you'll be stuck living with them, fighting in court, dealing with their lawyers trying to tear you apart. It'll be expensive and exhausting, and there's still a chance things won't go your way. So what do I do? Veronica was quiet for a long moment. How much do you want them to suffer? The question should have shocked me. It didn't. A lot, I said quietly. I want them to hurt the way they've hurt me. She nodded slowly. Then we need to get creative. We need to hit them where it really hurts. Their reputations, their money, their control. We need to make them implode. How? Tell me everything about them. Their routines. Their secrets. Their weaknesses. Everything. So I did. I told her about Micah's job at the investment firm, where image was everything. I told her about Lisa's social circle, wealthy women who valued status and propriety above all else. I told her about their vanity, their arrogance, their absolute certainty that they'd gotten away with using me. Okay, Veronica said when I finished. Here's what we're going to do. She laid out a plan. It was complicated. It was risky. It was probably morally questionable. It was perfect. The plan would take months to execute. We both knew that. Revenge is a dish best served cold after all, and I was willing to let it freeze solid. Phase 1 was already complete, gathering evidence. Phase 2 was about building a case for the outside world. I needed people to see me as sympathetic, as a victim, as someone worthy of support. You need to be visible, Veronica explained. Right now they've isolated you. Nobody knows what's really happening in your house. We need to change that. So I started volunteering at a local shelter. Just a few hours a week when Micah was at work and Lisa was busy with her social commitments. I brought Atlas with me. The staff there were kind and they started to get to know me. I made sure to occasionally show up looking tired, or to mention in passing how difficult things were at home. Dorothy is such a strong woman, I overheard one of the coordinators say. Dealing with a new baby and her demanding mother-in-law, and she still makes time to help others. Good. Let that image build. I also started reaching out to my old friends, the ones Micah had pushed away. I sent apologetic messages. I'm so sorry I've been distant. Things have been hard since the baby. I'd love to reconnect. Most of them responded warmly. We met for coffee, always in secret, always across town. I didn't tell them everything, but I told them enough. About feeling isolated. About Lisa's criticisms. About missing my old life. You can come stay with me anytime, my friend Julia offered. Seriously, Dorothy. If you need to get away, my door is always open. I thanked her but said I was managing. For now. Because I wasn't leaving. Not yet. Not until I'd destroyed them. Phase 3 began in June. That's when I started planting seeds of doubt about Micah at his workplace. It was Veronica's idea. She had a friend who worked in the same building as Micah's firm, just a few floors down. Have her start spreading rumors, I'd suggested. Nothing too specific. Just make people wonder. Veronica's friend, a woman named Kelly, began eating lunch in the same places as Micah's colleagues. She'd drop casual comments. Did you hear about that guy from Everett Investments? Apparently there's something weird going on with some of his accounts. I heard the SEC might be looking into someone at that firm. Wonder who it is. The financial documents I'd found showed that Micah had been skimming from my father's life insurance money, but I'd also discovered something else. He'd been doing the same thing to some of his clients. Small amounts here and there that he probably thought no one would notice. But I'd noticed. And I'd copied everything. I sent anonymous tips to the compliance department at his firm. I didn't include my name, just the account numbers and dates that didn't add up. Let them investigate. Let them discover what he'd been doing. Phase 4 targeted Lisa. Her social standing was everything to her. She spent her days having lunch with wealthy women, attending charity galas, sitting on the boards of meaningless foundations. She loved being seen as sophisticated, cultured, benevolent. So I started destroying that image piece by piece. I created a fake email account and sent messages to the other board members of Lisa's favorite charity, a foundation that supposedly helped underprivileged children. Has anyone else noticed that Lisa Everett hasn't actually donated any of her own money to this foundation? She claims she's broke but drives a Mercedes and wears designer clothes. Where is that money coming from? I sent photos, the ones I'd taken of her financial statements, to select people. People who would gossip. People who would question. I also started documenting every cruel thing Lisa said to me, every slap, every insult. I kept a detailed record, complete with dates and times. And I made sure to occasionally be seen in public with bruises. Makeup can do wonders for creating the appearance of injuries that fade at just the right speed to look real. "Are you okay?" a woman at the grocery store asked, noticing the faint mark on my arm, courtesy of some careful makeup application. "I'm fine," I said quietly, unconvincingly. "Just clumsy." But I could see her doubt. Could see her filing away the information for later. By August, cracks were starting to show. Micah came home from work one day looking tense. "They're doing an internal audit at the firm," he said, loosening his tie. "Just routine," they said, "but the timing is weird." "I'm sure it's fine," I said, keeping my voice neutral. Lisa's phone rang constantly now, hushed, urgent conversations where she'd excuse herself and close doors. Her friends were asking questions, I could tell. Wondering about her finances. Questioning her authenticity. "Everything okay?" I'd ask innocently. "Everything's fine," she'd snap. "Mind your own business." But everything wasn't fine. And it was about to get much worse. September came, and with it, the beginning of the end. Micah was called into a meeting at work. He'd been gone for hours when he finally came home, his face ashen. "They suspended me," he said, pouring himself a large glass of whiskey. "Pending the results of the investigation." "Investigation?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "They think I've been mishandling client funds." He drank deeply. "It's bullshit. Someone's out to get me." I made sympathetic noises while internally celebrating. Lisa's world was crumbling too. She'd been removed from the board of her precious charity after questions arose about her finances. Specifically about where she was really getting her money. The rumor mill was working overtime with whispers about her mooching off her son and his wife. Her friends stopped inviting her to events. Her calls went unreturned. She spent her days locked in her room, emerging only to take her frustration out on me. "This is your fault," she hissed one evening, cornering me in the kitchen. "You've poisoned everyone against us somehow. I don't know how, but I know it's you." "I don't know what you're talking about," I said calmly. She raised her hand to slap me, a move she'd done dozens of times before, but this time I caught her wrist. "Don't," I said quietly, looking her straight in the eye. "Don't you ever touch me again." Something in my voice must have startled her because she jerked her hand back, her eyes wide. For the first time since I'd known her, Lisa Everett looked genuinely afraid. Good. That night, I lay in bed next to Micah, who was tossing and turning, muttering in his sleep. He was stressed. Worried. His perfect life was unraveling and he had no idea why. I smiled in the darkness. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. October arrived with cold winds and falling leaves. The house felt different now. Tense, oppressive, like a rubber band stretched too tight. Micah and Lisa were both spiraling, turning on each other in ways they never had before. If you hadn't insisted on moving in, maybe none of this would be happening. Micah shouted at his mother one evening. "If you hadn't married that useless woman, we wouldn't be in this mess." Lisa fired back. I listened from the hallway, holding Atlas close, letting their words wash over me. They were eating each other alive. It was beautiful. But I saved my final move for late October. That's when I filed for divorce. I did it through a lawyer Veronica had recommended. A fierce woman named Patricia Chin who specialized in cases involving financial abuse and domestic violence. I gave her everything. Every document. Every recording. Every piece of evidence I'd been collecting for 6 months. "This is one of the most comprehensive cases I've ever seen," Patricia said, flipping through the files. "He won't know what hit him." "Good," I said. But I didn't just file for divorce. I also filed a police report about the physical abuse, complete with photos of the bruises, real and fabricated, witness statements from Veronica and others who'd seen me in distress, and the recordings of Lisa's verbal abuse. I filed complaints with the SEC and Micah's firm, providing detailed evidence of his financial misconduct. I sent everything, every last piece of dirty laundry, to a local news blogger who specialized in exposing corruption among wealthy families. I burned their world to the ground. Micah found out about the divorce when he was served papers at work. What was left of his work, anyway. He came home that evening like a hurricane, throwing open doors, shouting my name. I was sitting in the living room, Atlas in my arms, perfectly calm. "What the fuck is this?" he screamed, waving the papers in my face. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "I'm leaving you," I said simply. "And I'm taking my son with me." "Like hell you are. You're nothing without me. You have no money, no job, no." "I have everything," I interrupted. "I have evidence of your theft. Evidence of your mother's abuse. Evidence that you married me to steal my inheritance. And I've given copies to your employers, the police, and several news outlets. So you should probably call a lawyer. Actually, you'll need several lawyers." His face went from red to white in seconds. You can't." "I already have." Lisa appeared in the doorway, looking smaller and frielier than I'd ever seen her. "Dorothy, please. We can talk about this. We can work something out." "There's nothing to work out," I said, standing up. "I'm done being your victim." I walked past both of them, went upstairs, and grabbed the suitcases I'd already packed. I'd moved most of mine and Atlas's important belongings to a storage unit over the past few weeks. Everything else could stay. "Where do you think you're going?" Micah demanded, following me. "Somewhere you can't hurt me anymore." I walked out the front door with my head held high. Veronica was waiting in her car at the end of the driveway. She helped me load the suitcases and we drove away while Micah stood in the doorway, shouting threats that grew fainter and fainter. I didn't look back. The next few weeks were chaos, but it was a different kind of chaos. It was the chaos of freedom. I stayed with Veronica while the legal proceedings began. Atlas seemed happier too, as if he could sense that the oppressive atmosphere was gone. He smiled more. Slept better. So did I. The news broke fast. The blogger I'd contacted published a scathing exposé about Micah Everett and his mother. Their financial schemes, the abuse, the theft. It went viral within days. Micah's firm fired him and launched a full investigation. Several of his clients filed lawsuits. The SEC opened a formal inquiry. Lisa's remaining social connections evaporated overnight. She became a pariah, the broke con artist who'd been living off her son while abusing his wife. My lawyer, Patricia, was ruthless in the divorce proceedings. With the mountain of evidence I'd provided, Micah had no defense. He tried to fight for custody of Atlas, but the recordings of his complicity in the abuse destroyed any credibility he had. "You just watched as my client was assaulted by your mother," Patricia said in one hearing, playing the audio of that morning in April. "You not only failed to protect your wife, you encouraged the abuse. You're not fit to be a parent." The judge agreed. I got full custody of Atlas. I got the house. Though I sold it immediately, I never wanted to step foot in that place again. And I got my father's life insurance money back, plus damages. Micah and Lisa both faced criminal charges. He was convicted of embezzlement and fraud. She was convicted of assault. Neither of them would spend long in prison. White-collar criminals rarely do, but the damage to their reputations was permanent. The last time I saw Micah was at the final divorce hearing. He looked haggard, defeated, a shadow of the confident man I'd married. When our eyes met, I saw something there. Rage, yes, but also something else. Recognition. He finally understood what I'd done. How I'd played the long game. How I'd destroyed him from the inside out. "You'll regret this," he said as he walked past me. "I already regret marrying you," I replied. "Everything else has been an improvement." Which brings me back to that morning at the lake. It was early November, a month after everything had finalized. I'd moved into a small apartment across town. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Atlas and I were building a new life slowly but surely. But I knew Micah and Lisa weren't done. They'd been released on bail while awaiting sentencing, and I knew they blamed me for everything. The threatening phone calls had started 2 weeks earlier. The letters followed. Always the same message. "You destroyed us." I'd filed police reports, but what could the police really do? They couldn't protect me 24/7. So when I got the call that morning, Lisa's number, though I didn't answer, I knew they were coming. I'd prepared for this. Called it paranoia or intuition, but I'd been ready. I left Atlas with Veronica, told her not to worry, and drove to the lake. The same lake where Micah had proposed to me 3 years earlier. Poetic in a way. I knew they'd follow my phone's GPS. I knew they'd come. And they did. I stood at the edge of the water in my nightgown watching the sunrise when I heard their car pull up. 2 doors slamming. Footsteps rushing toward me. "Dorothy." That was Micah's voice. Dorothy, we need to talk. I didn't turn around. I just started walking into the water step by step, letting the cold seep into my bones. What is she doing? Lisa's voice, high and panicked. Dorothy, stop. Come back. I kept walking until the water was up to my chest. Then I turned to face them. They stood on the shore, both of them looking desperate and wild. Micah had lost weight. Lisa looked 10 years older than she had 6 months ago. You destroyed our lives, Micah said, his voice shaking. Everything we had, gone. Because of you. No, I said calmly. You destroyed your own lives. I just made sure everyone else knew what kind of people you really are. Please, Lisa called out, and I almost laughed at hearing her beg. Think about Atlas. Your baby needs you. You should have thought about Atlas before you tried to destroy me, I replied. And then I let myself fall backward into the water, disappearing beneath the surface. I could hear their muffled screams from under the water. Could imagine their panic. Let them think I'd given up. Let them think they'd won. But I was a strong swimmer, had been since childhood. I opened my eyes underwater, oriented myself, and began swimming parallel to the shore, staying submerged, using the murky water as cover. When I finally surfaced, I was 50 yards away, hidden behind a cluster of rocks. I quietly pulled myself onto the shore and watched. Micah and Lisa were in full panic mode. Micah had waded into the water up to his waist, looking around frantically. Lisa was on her phone, probably calling 911. Neither of them saw me climb out of the water on the far side of the lake, where Veronica was waiting with dry clothes and a knowing smile. You're absolutely insane, she said, handing me a towel. I learned from the best, I replied. We watched from the car as police and ambulances arrived. As divers went into the water to search for my body. As Micah and Lisa gave their statements, looking more and more suspicious with every word. Because here's what they didn't know. I'd left a note in my apartment. A suicide note. Talking about the harassment, the threats, the fear. Explaining how I couldn't take it anymore. Specifically naming Micah and Lisa as the reason I'd felt driven to this. The note was discovered within an hour of the 911 call. Suddenly, the police were looking at Micah and Lisa not as worried family members, but as potential suspects in what looked like it might be a death they'd caused. They were both arrested on the spot for harassment and suspected involvement in my death. Veronica and I drove away before anyone could spot us. I stayed dead for 3 days. It was Veronica's idea. Let them sweat it out in jail, let the media circus reach its peak, let everyone believe that Dorothy Everett had been driven to suicide by her abusive ex-husband and his monstrous mother. The news coverage was massive. My story was everywhere. The young mother who'd been abused, controlled, and financially exploited, who'd fought back and won, only to be harassed to death by the people who'd hurt her. Public opinion turned completely against Micah and Lisa. Death threats poured in. Their lawyers couldn't do press conferences without being shouted down. It was perfect. On the 3rd day, I walked into the police station with Patricia, my lawyer. I'm Dorothy Everett, I said to the stunned desk sergeant. And I believe you've been looking for me. The chaos that followed was spectacular. Micah and Lisa were released from the holding cells, only to be immediately rearrested for filing a false police report and wasting police resources, because they'd insisted I'd drowned when I obviously hadn't. The media went insane. Woman fakes death to expose abusers, read one headline. The ultimate revenge, how one mother turned the tables, read another. I did exactly one interview with a sympathetic female journalist who'd been following my story from the beginning. Why did you do it? She asked. Because I wanted them to feel what I felt, I said simply. Helpless. Terrified. Trapped. I wanted them to know what it's like to have your life destroyed by people who are supposed to love you. Do you regret it? I thought about that for a moment. About the elaborate plan. About the months of careful manipulation. About the morning at the lake. No, I said finally. I don't regret protecting myself and my son. I don't regret exposing the truth. And I don't regret making sure they can never hurt anyone else the way they hurt me. The interview went viral. Public opinion was split. Some people thought I was a hero, others thought I'd gone too far. I didn't care about either group. I cared about Atlas sleeping peacefully in his crib, finally safe. I cared about the restraining orders that would keep Micah and Lisa away from us permanently. I cared about the settlement money that would give us a secure future. Everything else was just noise. It's been a year since that morning at the lake. A year since I walked into the water and emerged as someone new. Atlas is 15 months old now. He's walking, babbling, discovering the world with wide, curious eyes. He'll never remember the house where he was born, the people who tried to control his mother, the darkness that hung over his first months of life. That's for the best. I'm back at work now, part-time at a different hospital. It feels good to be helping people again, to be using my skills for something meaningful. My colleagues know my story. It's hard not to after all the media coverage, but they're kind about it. They don't pry. Veronica is still my closest friend. We have coffee every Sunday while our kids play together. She has a daughter, Emma, who's 3. Sometimes we talk about what happened. Sometimes we don't. He gets it either way. My mother visits often now. She cried when she first saw Atlas after everything went down. I should have known, she kept saying. I should have seen what was happening. You couldn't have known, I told her. I barely knew myself until it was almost too late. As for Micah and Lisa, they're both out of prison now, serving probation. Micah lost his professional licenses. Lisa lost her social standing permanently. They're both essentially exiled from the community they once dominated. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they barely speak to each other anymore. Apparently they blame each other for how everything fell apart. The alliance that was supposed to destroy me ended up destroying them instead. Poetic justice. Sometimes, late at night when Atlas is sleeping and the apartment is quiet, I think about who I used to be. The Dorothy who walked down the aisle so full of hope. The Dorothy who believed love would be enough. The Dorothy who let herself be broken down piece by piece without fighting back. He seems like a stranger now. I won't say I'm proud of everything I did. The manipulation, the long game, the calculated destruction. Those things required me to become someone I never thought I'd be. Someone cold. Someone ruthless. But I'm not sorry either. Because that morning when Lisa slapped me, when Micah smirked and told me to hurry with his mother's breakfast, something fundamental changed inside me. I realized that sometimes the world doesn't reward you for being good, for being patient, for turning the other cheek. Sometimes you have to fight back with everything you have. Sometimes you have to become the monster to defeat the monsters. And sometimes revenge isn't just about payback. It's about justice. It's about making sure that people who hurt others face consequences. It's about protecting yourself and the ones you love, even if the methods aren't pretty. I look at Atlas now, this perfect little person who depends on me completely, and I know I'd do it all again. Every calculated move. Every careful manipulation. Every moment of cold, patient revenge. Because he's safe now. We're both safe. And Micah and Lisa? They'll spend the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders, wondering if there's another shoe waiting to drop, another secret waiting to surface. That's my final gift to them, the same paranoia and fear they gave me. I've thought about writing all of this down, turning it into a book or something. Veronica thinks I should. Other women need to hear your story, she says. They need to know they can fight back. Maybe I will someday. But for now, I'm content to live quietly, to raise my son, to build a life that's truly mine. The nightmares have mostly stopped. The hypervigilance has faded. I can sleep through the night without jerking awake in a panic, convinced someone's standing over me. Healing, I've learned, is its own kind of revenge. Every day that I'm happy, every moment that I'm free, every laugh I share with Atlas, it's all a testament to their failure. They tried to break me. They failed. I broke them instead. Last week I took Atlas to the park. It was one of those perfect autumn days, all golden light and crisp air. He was chasing leaves, laughing that pure, joyful laugh that children have. An older woman on a nearby bench smiled at us. "He's beautiful," she said. "You must be so proud." "I am," I replied, watching my son toddle across the grass. "More than I can say. Being a mother is the hardest job in the world," the woman continued, "but also the most rewarding." I nodded, not adding what I was really thinking, that being a mother meant I'd found something worth fighting for. Something worth destroying worlds for if necessary. As we left the park, Atlas fell asleep in his stroller, his small hand clutching his favorite stuffed elephant. I looked down at his peaceful face and made him a silent promise. No one will ever hurt you the way they hurt me. No one will ever make you feel small or worthless or trapped. I'll make sure you grow up knowing your worth, knowing you deserve respect, knowing that you should never accept abuse from anyone. And if anyone ever tries to hurt you, they'll have to go through me first. Because I'm not the woman who walked into that kitchen one April morning, shaking and scared, making eggs Benedict for a woman who just slapped her. I'm the woman who walked into a lake and came back from the dead. I'm the woman who taught two bullies that some people, when pushed far enough, don't just break. They break back. And they win.